Some phrases might sound harmless, or even charming, when you first hear them. But don't be fooled. Beneath their surface can lie manipulation, emotional immaturity, and a deep resistance to self-reflection. And when a woman overlooks these subtle signals, she can easily slip into relationships that drain her energy, cloud her intuition, and slowly pull her away from her own inner strength. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist, talked about something he called the shadow, a hidden part of our psyche where we stash away the traits we don't want to face in ourselves, often projecting them onto others. This shadow is where unhealthy patterns quietly form in relationships. That's why it's essential to recognize the kinds of phrases that reveal these deeper dynamics before they take hold. In this video, I'll walk you through 5 specific things a man might say that should immediately raise red flags. Because this isn't just about steering clear of arguments, that's just the surface. It's about understanding that sometimes, what seems like a casual chat could actually be a psychological trap. One that can rob you of your emotional balance and power over your own life. The philosopher Seneca once said that life isn't actually short. We just waste a lot of it. And more often than not, we waste it on people who never truly earned our time or presence. That's why I want you to really listen, because each of the phrases we're about to explore hides something deeper, and far more dangerous, beneath the surface. If you overlook them, you could find yourself in a relationship that slowly drains your energy, blurs your sense of direction, and chips away at your self-worth. Worst of all, it can sever the bond you have with yourself. And here's the truth: no woman who values her peace, who's fought to create a life of balance and self-respect, should ever allow these patterns to take root. So stay with me all the way through. Because I won't just help you recognize these red flags, I'll also show you exactly how to respond. You'll learn how to stand your ground with grace, how to protect your emotional space, and how to move forward without losing your power. Let's dive in. Phrase number 1. You have to accept me as I am. Now, at first, this might sound like honesty or even emotional openness. But let's take a closer look. But here's where you need to tread carefully. When a man uses this phrase to excuse harmful or toxic behavior, it quickly shifts from sounding sincere to becoming one of the biggest red flags you can encounter. Carl Jung once said that real wisdom begins with knowing ourselves. But he also emphasized something even more important. Personal growth starts the moment we stop hiding behind excuses and start facing the darker parts of who we are. So when someone leans on, "That's just how I am," as a shield to avoid change, you're not witnessing authenticity, you're witnessing resistance to growth. That phrase usually shows up after you've already seen patterns that don't sit right: emotional manipulation, dodging accountability, passive-aggressive behavior. The signs are there. And here's the most frustrating part. When you finally bring it up, instead of owning it, he flips the script. Suddenly, you're the one being unreasonable, you're the one trying to change him, and he becomes the victim in the story. But let's be real. Accepting someone for who they are does not mean accepting behavior that erodes your well-being. There's a difference between love and self-abandonment, and knowing where that line is makes all the difference. Real authenticity isn't about clinging to who you've always been. It's about having the strength to evolve. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic thinker, once said that the highest form of character is living each day as if it were your last, with purpose, with honesty, and without wasting time. For a conscious woman, a woman who is truly committed to her own growth, carrying the emotional weight of a partner who refuses to grow is not just exhausting, it's a disservice to herself. It's like trying to row a boat on your own, while he stands on the shore, unwilling to even step in. When you accept this phrase, "You have to accept me as I am," without examining it, you risk stepping into a cycle of recurring excuses, broken promises, and an unequal emotional load. You become the one doing all the inner work, while he avoids his share. The Stoics also believe something powerful. The people around us shape who we become. So if your partner isn't helping you rise, chances are he's anchoring you down. That's why the next time you hear this kind of statement, don't get swept up in how poetic or vulnerable it sounds. Ask yourself, is he truly open to self-reflection, or is this just a clever way to dodge growth? Because if his words are masking a refusal to change, a habit of deflecting blame, and a wall against personal evolution, then you're not just facing a flaw, you're facing a pattern. And patterns like this? They don't just stay the same. Over time, they deepen. And this is where it starts to get serious. Accepting that phrase, "You have to accept me as I am," isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. Because right after it, you'll often start noticing other behaviors creeping in. Subtle, yes, but quietly destructive. Before you know it, you're the one who's always adjusting. You're the one making the compromises, shrinking your needs, and bending your boundaries, while he remains exactly the same. Unmoved. Unchanging. But let me remind you of something important. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It's an act of self-respect. You are not here to rescue anyone. You're here to build a life with someone who also chooses growth, someone who sees their flaws and has the courage to face them, just like you do, day in and day out. A man who refuses to change doesn't just pause his own evolution, he drags yours down with him. That's why it's essential to stay grounded in your values. Let your decisions come from a place of clarity and self-respect, even when your emotions are pleading with you to hold on. Because what often follows next is even trickier to catch. All my exes were crazy, toxic. At first, it might sound like he's just blowing off steam about past relationships. But don't rush to sympathize just yet. But don't let those words fool you. Beneath the surface of that simple complaint lies something much deeper, and far more telling. What you're really hearing is a pattern of victimhood, emotional immaturity, and projection. Stoic philosophy reminds us that true personal growth begins with one thing: radical honesty with ourselves. Epictetus said it best, it's not the events themselves that upset us, but how we interpret them. So if a man constantly blames all his exes for everything that went wrong, and never takes a moment to examine his role in the story, it's a sign he's avoiding the mirror altogether. And this is exactly where deep psychology steps in. Carl Jung once said that the things we don't bring into conscious awareness end up controlling us from the shadows. In other words, what we refuse to face within ourselves doesn't disappear, it just hides, influencing our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships. So when a man repeatedly badmouths every woman from his past, it's often not a reflection of him, it's a projection of him. Of the wounds he hasn't healed, of the lessons he hasn't learned, and of the accountability he's still running from. This kind of phrase isn't just a red flag, it's a window into a dangerous mindset, the chronic victim. Someone who refuses to grow because they believe they're always the one who's been wronged. People who constantly repeat this kind of story, blaming all their exes, rarely take a hard look at their own actions. Instead, they recycle blame like clockwork, exaggerate the pain of the past, and unknowingly place a silent expectation on you to be the one woman who never lets him down. But here's the truth. No one escapes their shadow unless they're willing to confront it. And that leads us to the real question. Is it even realistic to believe that every one of his past partners was toxic? Or is it more likely that there's a pattern he's not willing or ready to see? A woman who's awake to her worth, who's walked the path of self-trust and refuses to abandon herself, must take that question seriously. Carl Jung warned us, "What we deny submits us." That means whatever we suppress in ourselves doesn't just go away, it gains power. Being in a relationship with someone who won't accept emotional responsibility is like trying to build a home on shifting sand. No matter how much effort you pour in, how loving or patient you are, He'll keep reliving the same old story, acting out the same unresolved script again and again. And here's the hardest pill to swallow. The narrative he spins about his exes? Eventually, it'll be spun about you. Because someone who clings to the victim role will always need a new villain. And once you no longer fit the fantasy, you'll become the next chapter in his blame-filled story. Being in a relationship like that is a lot like rowing a boat with a leak. You can pour all the love, time, and energy you have into it, but it'll still keep sinking. That's why emotional discipline isn't just important, it's essential. You've got to look past the surface. Ask yourself, has he ever taken ownership of what he did wrong in his past relationships? Or does he only talk about what others did to him? Because if he's never been accountable before, what makes you think he'll start now? And here's something you need to remember deeply. It's not your job to be anyone's therapist. You are not here to fix broken men who don't want to heal. Healing is a choice. And if he's not making it, that's not yours to carry. You're here to share your journey with someone who walks beside you, who supports your growth and invites you into theirs. Not someone who drags you back into their chaos and calls it love. And while we're on the topic of manipulation, there's one phrase that you need to be able to spot right away. Because although it sounds like an expression of love, it's actually one of the most dangerous traps out there. If you really love me, you do what I ask. At first, it might sound like a heartfelt plea, a vulnerable way of expressing a need. But look closer, and you'll see it for what it really is, emotional blackmail in disguise. But take a step back and look closer. What's really hiding behind that phrase is subtle manipulation. It's not love speaking, it's pressure. It's an attempt to use your feelings as leverage to gain control. The Stoics taught that real love can't be forced. It has to be chosen freely. Love, in its highest form, is rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and emotional freedom, not guilt, not obligation, and certainly not coercion. Epictetus once said that no one can enslave your emotions unless you give them permission. And that's exactly what this phrase tries to do. It twists affection into a bargaining chip. Carl Jung explored this too. In his work on the shadow, he described how unequal dynamics often form when one person, usually unknowingly, projects their insecurities and need for dominance onto the relationship, but disguises it as love. And phrases like, "If you really love me," are textbook examples. Because when a man says that, he's not expressing love, he's setting conditions. He's drawing an invisible line, suggesting that your affection must come with a cost. That you have to prove your love by surrendering your boundaries. What he's really saying is this: you're only worthy of my love if you do what I want. But let's be clear, that's not love. That's emotional manipulation wrapped in sweet-sounding words. An emotionally mature woman must be able to recognize the difference between a genuine request and a demand disguised as love. Because giving in to a phrase like this might feel like a loving gesture at first, but over time, it begins to erode you. Piece by piece, you start losing the essence of who you are, your authenticity, your boundaries, your sense of power. And the most dangerous part? The more you give in, the more the expectations grow. What begins as a test of love slowly morphs into a pattern of emotional submission. And before you even realize it, you're no longer sure if your actions come from love or from fear. Fear of disappointing him. Fear of losing the relationship. Fear of being seen as unloving. But phrases like this, they don't build strong relationships. They quietly dismantle them, one boundary at a time. So if you ever catch yourself in a conversation where someone makes you feel guilty for standing up for yourself, for protecting your time, your voice, your values, pause. Take a breath. Because what you're facing isn't love. It's someone who has mistaken love for possession. You are not here to twist yourself into knots to please someone else. You're here to create a relationship where you can grow, express your truth, and be fully yourself, without conditions, without compromise of your core. When a man says, "If you really love me, you do what I ask," he's not simply questioning your love. He's taking aim at your integrity. It's a subtle, but serious attack on your character. Because this phrase doesn't come from a place of connection or mutual understanding. It comes from a desire to control. It's manipulation wrapped in emotion. A quiet way to override your will by using guilt, slowly dismantling your boundaries, so his can take their place. Carl Jung reminded us that authentic love isn't about ownership or emotional games. True love is a conscious choice, an act of freedom shared between two whole people. And Stoic philosophy echoes this truth. Love that is healthy and lasting is built on mutual respect, not submission. If love turns into a weapon for emotional blackmail, then let's call it what it really is. It's no longer love. It's power, cleverly disguised as tenderness. When you give in to this kind of emotional blackmail, it doesn't just chip away at your boundaries. It deeply wounds your sense of self-worth. It erodes the self-discipline you've worked so hard to build. And for a woman who's done the inner work, who knows her value and stands rooted in her truth, there is nothing more damaging than betraying the truth just to keep the peace. Because every time you say yes, when your heart is screaming no, you move further away from your authentic self. You silence your voice. You dim your light. And here's the part that too many overlook. If you allow it once, it won't stop there. The pattern will repeat. What starts as a simple request becomes a demand, then a bigger one. And slowly, without even realizing it, you're no longer living your life. You're living according to someone else's script. You've been pulled out of the role of the main character and cast as a supporting role in someone else's story. But here's the truth. The answer, as both the Stoics and Carl Jung would agree, is not complicated. It's powerful in its simplicity. Stand firm. Stay rooted in your center. Because your peace, your voice, and your truth are not up for negotiation. Let your actions be guided by your principles, not by the ever-changing demands of someone who doesn't honor your boundaries. Because someone who genuinely loves you doesn't need to guilt you into submission. Real love listens. It seeks to understand. And even in disagreement, it still shows you respect. It's far more courageous and far more loving to have an honest, uncomfortable conversation than to silently endure a relationship where you feel emotionally caged. You are not obligated to explain yourself over and over, or to justify your choices just to appease someone who masks guilt as affection. A wise woman knows this. Not every battle is worth fighting, and the ones designed to break your spirit, those aren't battles at all. They're traps. And walking away is the most powerful move you can make. Now, speaking of emotional manipulation, there's one phrase that's even more corrosive. It's subtle. It's quiet. But it cuts deep. You're not enough for me. Hearing these words from someone who claims to love you isn't just painful, it's soul-shaking. Because this phrase doesn't merely wound. It goes straight for the heart of your self-worth, trying to dismantle it from the inside out. This isn't just a criticism. It's a direct hit on your identity, your value, and the very essence of who you are. When someone tells you, you're not enough, they're not offering feedback. They're launching an attack. Carl Jung taught us that people often project their inner dissatisfaction onto those around them. And this phrase? It's pure projection. When a man says you're not enough, he's not actually speaking about you. He's revealing his own emptiness, his own unresolved expectations, his own relentless need for control. What he's really doing is trying to shrink you, to make you feel small, uncertain, and dependent on his approval, so he can remain in control of how you see yourself. But Stoic philosophy reminds us of a vital truth. Your worth is not up for debate. It doesn't hinge on someone else's opinion. It comes from your actions, your character, and the way you stay true to your inner values. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, "Do not let another man's soul rule over yours." And that's precisely what this phrase attempts to do. It tries to govern you, not with love, but with insecurity. Because anyone who belittles you, who compares you, or suggests you need to earn their love, isn't loving you. They're controlling you. They're trying to make you work harder, not to grow, but to chase their approval. And in that kind of game, you will always lose, because the rules are constantly changing. Today, you're not enough for this reason. Tomorrow, it's something else. And before long, you're exhausted, second-guessing parts of yourself you once held with confidence. But a conscious woman doesn't beg for love. She doesn't perform to earn her worth. She knows that her value isn't up for negotiation. You're not here to mold yourself into someone else's ever-shifting standards. You're here to walk beside someone who cherishes you for who you are, not who they want to shape you into. Someone who encourages your growth, not your self-doubt. So if you ever hear the words, "You're not enough," stop, take a breath, and remember who you are. Remember what you've overcome. Remember what you bring to the table. Don't fall into the illusion that you need to become more just to satisfy someone who refuses to see what's already right in front of them. That insecurity, that lack, that's not yours to carry, it belongs to him. As Carl Jung once said, "You cannot make someone see your light if they are only searching for their shadows." And as any Stoic would remind us, your inner peace is far more valuable than any attempt to squeeze yourself into someone else's mold. External validation? It's fleeting. It shifts with moods, motives, and ego. True confidence begins when a woman stops waiting for someone else's approval and starts validating herself. When she trusts her intuition and lives by her own values, not someone else's expectations. One of the greatest mistakes you can make is allowing someone, especially a man who weaponizes your insecurities, to define your worth. When a man tells you that you're not enough, understand this. He's not offering truth. He's revealing his own emptiness, his inflated ego, his need for control masked as honesty. This phrase isn't about connection, it's about domination. It's not searching for truth. It's trying to subject your self-esteem to an endless cycle of judgment. And here's the spoiler: that judgment will never be fair. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not make conscious becomes our fate." And if you don't catch these comments for what they are, if you don't name them early, you could wake up one day stuck in a relationship where you're constantly trying to prove your worth. And in that never-ending effort, you begin to lose sight of who you really are. The Stoics taught that no one's opinion can harm you, unless you give it power. And that's your call to make. Marcus Aurelius said it best, "Do not let another soul rule over yours." If a man insists on making you feel like you're not enough, the wisest response isn't to stay and prove him wrong. It's to walk away. With grace, with dignity, and without hesitation. Not because you're being prideful, but because you respect yourself too much to stay in a place where you're diminished. Emotional discipline means protecting the things you've worked so hard to build: your confidence, your clarity, your freedom. It means not letting careless words unravel the strength you've cultivated within. Seneca said, "The greatest power is self-mastery." And that kind of mastery begins the moment you stop accepting emotional scraps masked as feedback. You no longer settle for half-hearted love or manipulative approval. So if you ever hear those words, "You're not enough," pause, breathe, stand tall in your truth, and remember, the flaw isn't in you. The flaw is in his need to feel powerful by making you feel small. And when you walk away, do it with certainty, because your worth isn't up for debate. It's not measured by his standards, or anyone else's. Especially not by someone who's too blind to see your brilliance. And now we come to the final phrase, one that may be the most dangerous of them all. "Do whatever you want," said in that cold, passive-aggressive tone? When a man says this with sarcasm, resentment, or emotional distance, he's not giving you freedom. He's setting a trap. A trap designed to make you feel guilty for thinking for yourself, for making your own choices, for honoring your autonomy. He's not stepping back to respect your independence. He's masking control as permission. It's a subtle manipulation, one that Carl Jung warned us about, how people often manipulate from the shadows, using indirect language to control outcomes without taking responsibility. And this phrase? It's a textbook example. He's not communicating honestly. He's not telling you what he really feels or wants. Instead, he forces you into a guessing game, where the rules are unwritten, and the punishment for guessing wrong is emotional guilt, tension, or silent reproach. But real relationships aren't built on mind games. The Stoics remind us that healthy connections thrive on clear, honest, and direct communication. If someone can't say what they mean and mean what they say, they're not engaging in love. They're engaging in emotional manipulation. Seneca captured it perfectly. Speak so that your words require no interpretation. Because when someone talks to you in riddles, cloaked in irony and hidden meanings, they're not communicating, they're manipulating. These kinds of phrases keep you in a state of constant second-guessing. You start tiptoeing around their moods, adjusting your words, overanalyzing their tone, until suddenly you're no longer living by your emotions. You're living by theirs. And in that slow erosion of clarity, your peace of mind begins to slip away. But a woman who's developed emotional intelligence, who understands her worth and honors her center, knows better than to play the game. So what's the best way to respond to a phrase like, "Do whatever you want," when it's laced with passive aggression? Simple. Take it at face value. Do it. Not with anger, not to provoke, but with calm certainty. Do it without fear, without endless explanation, and without getting tangled in their emotional web. That one clear action does something powerful. It breaks the pattern. It forces the other person to either grow up and communicate directly, or to sit alone in the silence they created. Because when you stop playing along, the manipulation loses its power. Because you're no longer available for emotional games. You've outgrown them. Both Carl Jung and the Stoics taught that living with clarity and authenticity is the path to real freedom. And that freedom begins not when you react, but when you choose. Choose your words carefully. Choose your boundaries with intention. And above all, choose who is truly worthy of your energy. Responding with clarity, or choosing to walk away from a conversation laced with ambiguity, is not cold. It's emotional intelligence. It's self-respect in action. It's the moment you draw a firm line and say, "I won't let anyone play with my heart, my mind, or my peace." The Stoic response to these moments is both simple and powerful. Don't waste your energy trying to decode what someone lacks the courage to say outright. Because ambiguity? It's not a communication style. It's a tool of control. And a conscious woman, just like a Stoic man, will always choose clarity over confusion, consistency over chaos, and inner freedom over emotional entanglement. So stay grounded in your truth. Act with firmness. And never forget, peace isn't something you earn from others, it's something you protect within yourself. And always remember this. A man who truly wants to be with you will never need to manipulate you, speak in riddles, or create emotional confusion. Real, healthy love doesn't play games. It shows up with honesty, with presence, with transparency. Inner peace is born when your thoughts, your words, and your actions align. When who you are, what you say, and how you live move in harmony. And as we've uncovered throughout this video, those phrases that might seem harmless at first, those quiet red flags, are often clear signals of something deeper, something dangerous. If left unchecked, they can lead you into relationships that slowly drain your energy, your clarity, and your very essence. Both Stoic philosophy and Carl Jung's deep psychological work remind us to look beyond the surface, to see the pattern, not just the moment, to listen not only to the words, but to the intent behind them. Because in the end, this isn't about judgment. It's about wisdom. It's about recognizing when someone's presence is costing you your peace, and knowing, without guilt, when it's time to walk away. Not to punish them, but to protect yourself. Not to hurt, but to heal. Not to escape, but to come home to who you truly are.